Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really plunging into South and Southeast Asia, looking at that period roughly 1200 to 1450.
Right, a really dynamic time. And the materials you brought together, they really highlight this interplay between belief systems and how states were evolving.
Exactly. We've got Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism all in the mix. And our mission really for this deep dive is to pull out the key takeaways. How did religion actually shape these societies?
And how did these different states, because there were quite a few, actually build and, importantly, hold on to power? What were their strategies?
Okay, let's get into it. Starting in South Asia, the Indian subcontinent, the sources clearly show Hinduism as, well, the dominant force there.
Yeah, deeply rooted. And it's polytheistic, so belief in many gods, but with this ultimate goal, right? Reuniting the individual soul, the atman, with Brahman.
The underlying reality of everything. And that journey involves reincarnation, the cycle of rebirth.
And crucially, that ties into the social structure, the caste system. It wasn't just spiritual, it was very much about social order.
A really rigid hierarchy, as the sources describe it. Very little moving up or down within one lifetime. Your position was sort of seen as earned from past lives.
Exactly, reinforcing that social order. Now, Buddhism also started there, and it shares ideas like reincarnation, that ultimate oneness.
But it was different, wasn't it? More about equality from the get-go.
Absolutely, and it had that universalizing aspect. It could spread, adapt to different cultures more easily than Hinduism, which often seems more tied to, well, the land and people of India itself.
Which makes it kind of surprising then that by 1200, Buddhism's influence in India was actually fading? Why was that happening?
Well, it's complicated. You had resurgent Hindu movements, these new devotional paths gaining ground.
And then the big political shift.
Right. The arrival of Turkic Muslim invaders and the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate in 1206. That really changed the religious landscape.
So Islam becomes the #2 belief system in South Asia, politically powerful, at least in the north.
Yes, it becomes the religion of the elite in many areas and starts that spread eastward into Southeast Asia too. It really diversifies the whole picture.
And when we look at Southeast Asia itself, the word is definitely diversity, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not like India with one dominant faith.
Hmm.
You see Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, all establishing themselves in different states, often blending in unique ways.
And these religions weren't static either. They were changing internally during this time. Let's circle back to Hinduism for a moment.
Yeah, the bhakti movement is key here, this push toward devotion to a specific god.
And importantly, it challenged the hierarchy.
It did. It was about direct spiritual experience for anyone, regardless of caste or status, a much more personal path.
Okay, and we see something maybe parallel happening within Islam, with Sufism.
Exactly. Sufism is that more mystical, experiential side of Islam. Like Bhakti, it emphasized that direct connection to the divine, often less focused on, strict legal interpretations or elite religious structures.
It's fascinating that shared emphasis on personal experience, almost cutting across religious lines.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about that fundamental human need for connection.
So what about Buddhism then? We said it was declining in India, but how was it changing internally?
Well, interestingly, while the Buddha's original message was quite inclusive, sources suggest that in South Asia during this time, it became perhaps a bit more exclusive.
How so?
The focus shifted more towards monasticism, monks in monasteries being the main ones seen as really pursuing nirvana.
Which might have made it feel less relevant to everyday people, contributing to its decline there.
Quite possibly, yeah. While, as we'll see, it takes a very different central role in some Southeast Asian states.
A real divergence.
Okay.
Let's shift gears to state building. How did these beliefs connect with political power? Back to South Asia first, the Delhi Sultanate.
Established 1206, northern India, Muslim rulers. But, and this is important, they really struggled to convert the population.
Hinduism was just too entrenched.
Deeply. Socially, culturally. So Islam remained a minority faith, even with Muslims in charge. Political power didn't just automatically translate.
And that resistance contributes to the rise of a rival power in the south.
Yes, the Vijayanagra Empire, a major Hindu kingdom founded in the 14th century. And the story of its founding is just incredible.
Tell us about that.
Well, the Delhi Sultanate sent these two brothers, Hindi emissaries, who had converted to Islam south to extend Muslim influence.
Okay.
But once they got down there, away from direct control, they apparently renounced Islam and set up this powerful Hindu empire specifically to challenge the Sultanate.
Wow. That's quite a statement about resisting external rule.
Definitely underscores the strength of local identity and belief.
And we also had the Rajput kingdoms in the north.
Right, a collection of established Hindu kingdoms, often fighting amongst themselves, mind you. Some were eventually conquered by Muslim forces, but others held out. It was a fragmented picture.
Okay, let's pivot now to Southeast Asia. You mentioned this distinction the sources make between sea-based and land-based states.
Yeah, it's about how they primarily built their power. Was it controlling maritime trade routes, or was it controlling land and agricultural resources?
Makes sense. Let's start with the sea-based ones, Srivijaya.
A classic example.
Hmm.
Based around modern-day Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, peaking a bit before our main period but influential into it, Buddhist state, lots of Indian Hindu cultural overlay.
And their power came from.
Controlling the Strait of Malacca. Simple as that almost. Taxing the ships going through that vital choke point. That was the source of their wealth and influence.
Right, control the trade, control the power. Then there's the Majapahit Empire.
Rose later, 13th century, based on Java. Started Hindu, significant Buddhist influence too. They used a different sea-based strategy,
Which were
a tributary system. They didn't necessarily rule everywhere directly, but they made other states pay tribute goods, resources acknowledging Majapahit dominance. It projected power across the waters.
okay, exerting influence rather than direct control everywhere. And the Sukhothai kingdom in Thailand, another sea-based player.
Sort of, but with a twist. They broke away from the Khmer Empire. What's really notable about Sukhothai is their promotion of Theravada Buddhism. It became central to their identity.
So how do they consolidate power differently?
More through religious legitimacy, building impressive temples, huge Buddhist statues. It was less about controlling trade routes like Srivijaya, more about cultural and religious influence cementing their rule.
Interesting. So even within sea-based, there are variations. Controlling waterways, demanding tribute, or building legitimacy through religion and culture.
Precisely. Now let's look at the land-based states. The Khmer Empire is probably the most famous.
Centered in Cambodia. And they started as Hindu, which you said was a bit unusual for Hinduism's spread.
Yes, quite unusual. They became incredibly prosperous, built Angkor Wat, originally a massive Hindu temple complex reflecting the Hindu cosmos.
But they didn't stay Hindu.
No, later rulers converted to Buddhism. And Angkor Wat itself shows this amazing blend, this syncretism. They added Buddhist statues and elements into the existing Hindu structure.
You can literally see the layers of belief there.
You really can. It speaks to a kind of religious fluidity.
And finally, the Sinhala dynasties in Sri Lanka. An island, but you classify it as land-based. Why?
Good question. It's because, although an island, their power base and focus were primarily internal. They were largely self-sufficient.
So they weren't playing that big maritime power game like Srivijaya or Majapahit.
Exactly. Their strength came from controlling their own land, their resources, their people. They had a long, long history as a Buddhist state, but their power dynamics were rooted on the island itself.
Okay, so pulling this all together, it's a complex picture for South and Southeast Asia between 1200 and 1450. You've got Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism interacting, changing.
And shaping societies in very real ways. And then you have states using diverse strategies, controlling land, controlling trade, using religion for legitimacy to build and maintain power. New Hindu and Buddhist states rising even as Islam gained influence.
What really stands out is how belief wasn't just, an abstract idea. It directly impacted social structures, like with Bhakti challenging the caste system, or political legitimacy, like Sukhothai using Buddhism.
Absolutely. These weren't separate spheres.
Mhm.
Religion and politics were deeply intertwined. The choices rulers made about religion had real consequences for their power and the identity of their kingdoms.
So for you listening, the question becomes, how do these dynamics, this interplay of faith, power, trade, identity from 700 or 800 years ago, still echo in the region today?
Right. When you look at modern South and Southeast Asia, how much can you trace back to this period? What about that cultural blending, that syncretism we saw in places like Angkor Wat, or the long-term effects of these different state-building models?
Lots to think about there. That seems like a good place to leave our deep dive for today. Thanks for exploring this with us.